You know that feeling when you're trying to learn a new language and you just hit a brick wall? We've all been there. You start out super motivated, but pretty soon you're just drowning in rote memorization, endless grammar drills, and those dry, high-stress textbooks. It's incredibly common, and honestly, it's completely exhausting. But what if the key to finally breaking through that wall wasn't a better textbook, but a better story?
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive into a pretty surprising secret cognitive weapon for language acquisition. We are talking about Gothic young adult fiction. Specifically, we're looking at how Neil Gaiman's wonderfully creepy novella, Coraline, can be used to completely supercharge your language learning, especially when it comes to dramatically boosting your vocabulary. Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll start with Section 1, Beyond Boring Textbooks, then 2, The Power of YA Fiction, 3, The Gothic Solution, Coraline, 4, Expanding Vocabulary Through Story, 5, Multimodal Learning and Film, and finally 6, Bringing Stories to Class.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Beyond Boring Textbooks. We really need to understand the psychological barriers here. Have you ever heard of the affective filter hypothesis? It was developed by linguist Stephen Krashen. Basically, it explains that as an adult learner, you often experience high language anxiety, and this underlying fear of being judged or evaluated negatively. When you pair that stress with really dry, predictable reading materials, your brain literally throws up a cognitive barrier. This filter just blocks language acquisition entirely. You're reading the words, sure, but your stressed-out brain flat out refuses to absorb them.
So how do we fix that? That brings us to Section 2, The Power of YA Fiction. It really is the perfect antidote.
To understand why it works, we have to look at two totally different ways of reading. Traditional language classes rely on intensive reading. That means careful reading, heavy translation, specific drills. It's grueling, right? But young adult fiction opens the door to extensive reading. This is rapid, autonomous reading for pleasure and for meaning. You aren't stopping every 5 seconds to look up a word, you're just letting the story pull you forward. It takes reading from being this intimidating chore and transforms it into a really powerful, autonomous cognitive tool.
And the data on this is wild. Empirical studies show that structured novel reading programs result in an average 30% increase in vocabulary size. 30%! Just by reading a novel for pleasure, learners are seeing these massive gains in reading comprehension and syntactic familiarity, and they're completely bypassing the exhaustion of those heavily modified, boring graded readers.
Let's actually put a human face on that data. Take a listen to this experience from Mysoon, an English as a foreign language student. She noted that reading YA fiction actually inspired her to check out other English language works, and it ultimately enhanced her writing by naturally growing her vocabulary. Researchers have found that when students just take a break from scholarly articles and textbooks to read YA fiction, they gradually and almost unconsciously start acquiring new words and expressions. It gives them this emotional depth that a standard textbook barely even touches.
Which pivots us perfectly into Section 3, The Gothic Solution, focusing on Neil Gaiman's Coraline. Fascinatingly, researchers have actually compared the character of Coraline to the final girl trope in horror movies. You know, the last one standing who has to outsmart the monster. And if you think about it, for a language learner, acquiring a new language is a lot like a final girl journey. You are thrown into this scary, completely unfamiliar linguistic landscape. You can't rely on anybody to rescue you. You have to use your own wit, resilience, and strategic problem solving to navigate your way through it.
But why this specific book? Well, Coraline offers this magic formula: accessible syntax plus mature themes. Think about it. As an adult learning a second language, you absolutely do not want to be talked down to with childish concepts. But at the same time, you aren't exactly ready for super complex Victorian sentence structures. Coraline is the perfect bridge. It provides a lightweight linguistic load paired with highly sophisticated mature themes like identity fragmentation, isolation, and overcoming trauma. It deeply respects your cognitive maturity as an adult learner.
Okay, moving into Section 4, Expanding Vocabulary Through Story. Let's look at how this actually supercharges growth.
The core mechanism at play here is called incidental vocabulary acquisition, or IVA. This is basically the learning that takes place when your primary focus is actually somewhere else, like, say, surviving a terrifying story. Because Gothic literature is all about suspense, existential dread, and the macabre, it pulls these really strong emotional responses out of you. Your brain gets so focused on the plot, it literally forgets to be anxious about learning English. That emotional hook lowers the affective filter we talked about earlier, allowing all this new vocabulary to just effortlessly lock into your memory.
And the vocabulary students naturally pick up from this atmospheric world is incredibly rich. You've got socio-contextual words describing the old house, like derelict, eccentric, and monotony. You have wonderfully descriptive adjectives like acrid, sinister, and saccharine. They're even picking up high-level cognitive terms like apprehension and alienation, and verbs related to power dynamics like implore and subvert. This definitely isn't your basic tourist vocabulary. This is advanced, highly expressive language gleaned simply by enjoying a spooky story.
Now, there is a small catch. While incidental exposure is fantastic, research shows that purely incidental learning is prone to knowledge decay and slow retrieval over time. So, to truly illuminate these new words and make them stick permanently, you really have to pair that reading with intentional practice. Doing activities like semantic mapping, where you visually connect new words by class and meaning, helps cement that vocabulary forever.
That takes us to Section 5, Multimodal Learning and Film. This is where we bring in the next dimension.
Let's see how this builds using the 2009 stop-motion film adaptation of Coraline. The linguist Roman Jakobson identified 3 translation types. The first 2 are pretty familiar. Intralingual, which is rewording complex English into simpler English, and interlingual, which is just translating it to your native language. But the real magic happens in step 3, intrasemiotic translation. This is transmuting verbal prose into visual scenes. So having students adapt Gaiman's text into a visual storyboard, or comparing the book's descriptions directly to the movie's visuals, is an unbelievably effective learning tool.
And the reason this works so well is because of dual-channel processing. When you combine high-quality visual animations with spoken target language, like watching the Coraline movie, you are actually minimizing cognitive overload. The visual context of the stop-motion animation naturally aids language learners in word segmentation. You're literally hearing where one word ends and another begins because of the visual cues, which drastically improves auditory comprehension.
All right, our final section, Section 6, Bringing Stories to Class. Let's look at some practical applications.
If you were to design a structured, faster-read Coraline curriculum, you'd pair a literary focus with a multimodal activity each week. For example, Week 1 uses visual story mapping to activate background knowledge. Week 2 looks at the creepy other mother doppelganger through character mapping. By Week 3, students are doing semantic mapping of that advanced identity vocabulary we talked about. And by Week 5, they are actively subtitling or even dubbing a 2-minute scene from the film. It's just an incredibly dynamic, hands-on way to interact with a language.
What's really amazing here is how perfectly these activities map onto Zoltan Dornier's framework for keeping language learners motivated. By giving students choice boards, you're promoting autonomy. By letting them relate Coraline's feelings of isolation to their own lives, you completely personalize the learning. And by using gamified vocabulary reviews or low-stakes movie screenings, you create a pleasant, relaxed atmosphere. You keep them engaged because they genuinely want to know what happens next in the story.
So to sum this all up, this gives a massive green light for using speculative fiction in language learning. Gothic YA fiction like Coraline provides a safe, highly engaging, and incredibly effective bridge. It gets you away from the drudgery of rote memorization and pulls you straight toward advanced literary competence and long-term vocabulary retention, all by simply capturing your imagination. So, I want to leave you with a question to really challenge your future learning strategies. The next time you feel stuck behind that frustrating brick wall of language learning, what story will you use to conquer your next language? Find a tale that thrills you, scares you, or fascinates you, and just let the words teach themselves. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep reading and keep learning.